All right, so if you guys remember, some months ago there was that election for the union at the Amazon facility in Bessemer, Alabama that unfortunately failed. But if you were watching my coverage or any other leftists that were talking about it at the time, we were discussing a lot of the blatant violations of labor law that Amazon was engaging in order to try to dissuade a lot of their employees from understanding what the union could potentially get them in terms of bargaining power, and in terms of better conditions that they could be fighting for as a collective instead of as individuals, that Amazon can use a process of sort of divide and conquering. And so they violated a bunch of different laws, and we're going to get into the actual details in this report that has now been released by the National Labor Relations Board. But in addition to that, I just want to recap some of the other egregious shit that they were doing at the time that is technically legal under our labor law, but still is just ridiculous violations of people's actual freedom to understand the process of forming a union and have a good faith discussion with their colleagues about what exactly the benefits could be associated with that. So first, let's go ahead and discuss what labor laws they apparently violated. So here from NBC News: Amazon violated labor law in Alabama union election. Labor official fines workers at a warehouse in Bessemer voted against joining a union in April, but union officials immediately claimed the company had illegally meddled in the voting process. So the National Labor Relations Board has determined that Amazon violated labor law after workers at its Bessemer, Alabama warehouse tried to join a union. The Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Workers Union said Monday workers at the Alabama warehouse voted against forming a union in April, but representatives of the union immediately challenged the outcome on the grounds that Amazon engaged in illegal interference with employees' votes to discourage them from unionizing. And some of the things that they were talking about. So some workers at the warehouse in Bessemer alleged that Amazon went to great lengths to discourage them from voting for the union, including hanging signs over the toilets and bathroom stalls, conducting mandatory meetings about the downsides of joining a union, and hiring people to walk around the warehouse to talk to workers about why they should not be joining a union. 3 Amazon employees in Bessemer said in interviews earlier this year. So those are some of the things that could be classified as technically legal under our labor law, which is part of the problem here. Obviously, we don't have big enough or bold enough labor laws to protect the ability for us to form union. That's why things like the PRO Act right now that's in Congress are so important to pass, because it would actually protect the right for people to organize unions in this way without having some of these ridiculous tactics being thrown upon them by a trillion-dollar company like Amazon. And like they said there, I mean, they just went to such ridiculous lengths, and we're going to get into some more of the other egregious things that they did. But like they said, you know, installing propaganda in the bathroom stalls so you can't even have even a moment's rest without being bombarded from propaganda from management and corporate. And in addition to that, hiring people to walk around. I'm pretty sure they literally hired the Pinkertons, which, if you don't know the history of the Pinkertons, I would recommend you go and look at their Wikipedia page. But the Pinkertons, they hired the Pinkertons and other enforcement mechanisms to try to basically bully their workers into not forming this union. And then another one, the core accusation that was really the biggest part of this by the union, is that Amazon illegally arranged for the U.S. Postal Service mailbox to be installed in the fulfillment center parking lot during the election, and the union alleged that it gave the impression that Amazon might have had access to secret ballots cast by workers, or that workers might be under surveillance as they cast their votes. Amazon is alleged to have moved forward with the installing of the mailbox even after the National Labor Relations Board denied their request to place the ballot drop boxes on site. So, I mean, this shouldn't even be controversial, right? If you're going to have a free and fair independent election for this union to take place, then you wouldn't be trying to force your workers to submit their ballot drop boxes under cameras on the facility grounds, right? I mean, that's obviously intimidation. They're obviously going to have, at least some of them would have the assumption that, oh, well, maybe I could, you know, potentially face consequences for this, or even be let go from my job if they find out that I voted for the union. So even after all of the blatant propaganda that they are being subjected to, then you're being subjected to potentially surveillance. You're being subjected to, you know, who knows who's going to be looking through this Dropbox. Does Amazon have a key to the Dropbox? So the whole point of having an independent election, like through these other, the RWDSU elections and through the National Labor Relations Board itself, is so that it's independent from the corporation. So this is a blatant violation, especially considering it was installed after the National Labor Relations Board said you can't do that. They just went ahead and did it anyways. So it's just completely ridiculous. And I'm going to throw this video down below because this is just another recap of all of the things that they were doing during this time period in order to try to dissuade their workers from joining this union. So I'm going to drop this below. It's about a 10-minute video, but it's really good as a recap for that. And so now I want to get into the actual actual specific allegations of what they're talking about in this. So here's the actual hearing officer's report on the objections. So I'm going to read it out if you can't see it. But on April 9th, 2021, a tally of ballots issued in a mail ballot election that had commenced on February 8, 2021. That tally reflected that a majority of employees who had cast the ballots in the election voted against representation by the RWDSU union. However, the petitioner contests the results of the election, claiming that Amazon engaged in objectionable conduct, and as a result of this objectionable conduct, the petitioner, the union, asked that the election be set aside and that a new one be directed. Specifically, the petitioner contends that the employer interfered with the laboratory conditions necessary to conduct fair elections by causing a mailbox to be installed on its premises, by polling employees, by threatening employees, by hiring additional police, and by interfering with the union's access to voters by causing the county to alter the timing of traffic lights. So this was one that was one of the more egregious and just kind of ridiculous stories that came out during this time. They literally petitioned the county to change the traffic light patterns there's basically a little driveway that leaves the Amazon facility that workers would be leaving down. And so the people who were trying to form this union and do the organizing efforts, they were stationing themselves at the bottom of that pathway so that whenever employees were leaving the facility, that they would be able to stop at the traffic light and potentially have a couple minutes to talk with the people who were trying to form a union, understand, maybe get some information and some literature on what was happening. And Amazon literally went to the county to get those traffic light patterns changed so that anytime somebody was driving down that road, they wouldn't be able to stop at the bottom and consult with the people trying to form the union. They would basically be sabotaged in that effort. So they went to every single length possible, humanly possible, in order to try to crush this union effort. And that's what they were talking about there with the traffic lights. And so they continue, after conducting the hearing and carefully reviewing the evidence and the arguments made by the parties, I recommend that petitioners' objections be sustained, in part because the evidence demonstrates that the employer's conduct interfered with the laboratory conditions necessary to conduct fair election. More specifically, the conduct which interfered with the result of the election relates to the employer's polling of employees by distribution of vote no paraphernalia in the presence of supervisors and managers, as well as the employer's unilateral decision to cause the United States Postal Service to install generic unlabeled mail collection box less than 50 feet from the main entrance to the facility at a location suggested by the employer and immediately beneath the visible surveillance cameras mounted on the employer's main entrance. So again, they went to every single length humanly possible in order to try to crush this union, and a lot of those things they did potentially could have been literally illegal under our labor laws. So hopefully they're actually going to be able to get this redo election, basically, and that the workers at this Amazon Bessemer facility are going to be able to actually have another chance here at organizing and trying to form a union, so that they're not subjected to the horrific conditions that they have been at Amazon facilities like they are all across the country. But understand the other problem here with this union and what makes it so difficult to form a union at Amazon is that Amazon, according to their own internal policies, they have the specific purpose of trying to cycle through workers, to beat down workers as quickly as possible so that they can only last for, whether it's a couple months, a couple days, or a couple years. They want their workers to be cycling through. They have one of the highest turnover rates of any company in the entire country. I think it's a turnover rate of like 150% per year. So they basically want to take in workers, take in employees, grind them down as much as humanly possible by giving them the ridiculous quotas that we know that they give them, by making some of their workers shit and piss in bags to meet those quotas, by subjecting them to horrific conditions, beating them down, grinding them down, so that they'll then quit, so that they will then leave, and so that they don't have the ability to form long-term careers at the Amazon facility, so that they don't have the ability to form long-term collective bargaining agreements like could be found in something like a union. So that's part of the reason why it's also, in addition to just Amazon's blatant propaganda and some of the illegal tactics they've been doing, just by nature of how the company functions, they want a high turnover rate of their employees. So it's harder to organize people when it's not necessarily a career and it's not something that they're going to be staying at long term, because the job itself is designed to beat them down into submission until they have to leave. And Amazon never hires from within, they never promote from within. So it's all part of this process of treating workers as if they are machines, treating them as if they are a cog in the machine, that they have no actual value, that they should have no voice as a collective in terms of their wages, their benefits, and the safety conditions within the facilities. So that's why Amazon is working so hard in order to crush this union. And honestly, I'm thankful that they're going to have this additional chance to do this. And hopefully in this next time, it actually succeeds.